We're about ready for kick-off time, but can I first of all say we have got our own Roy Vickers doing some filming for us, and of course we've got the team here tonight, which is Tom and Simon from The One Show. Now, yes, and we welcome them here. I've been asked to make sure that nobody objects to being filmed, because we want to do a video, but because we've got children in, if there's any parents who object to having your children on film or whatever, then all I can suggest is put a bag over their heads so we don't recognise them.
That makes it even worse.
Okay, right. So that's we're in a position then, I think, to get started. And can I just make some introductions? I'll start on my left because it's easiest. This is David Ingham, Dr. David Ingham from Ward, Wharfdale and Airedale Review Development, who you know are working in conjunction with us to look at issues up and down the Wharf Valley. Steve Ellams, you know, and Chris Schofield, who is acting as our solicitor and providing a stalwart service for us. Okay, we've got Philip Moore over there, who will probably contribute at some point in time. Be grateful if he does. Okay, right. Then there's a fairly swift running order tonight because we don't want this to take more than an hour or so. I'd like to say thank you, first of all, for you turning out in such good numbers and on a pig of a night. I know it's frosty tonight rather than snowing anymore, but we still appreciate you being here. The swift running order is this: welcome, introductions and explanation about the TV coverage, done, tick, gone. An outline of where we are now, which I'll handle, and then I'll pass over to Steve and also to Chris for an understanding of the concerns that we're still facing, and then I want to throw the issues open to you to ask any questions that you need to do, and that basically is it, and we'll wash it up for the evening at that point. Okay, so nice to see so many faces here tonight. Welcome, friends. Right, I'll sit down if you don't mind. Or do you mind? Right, you do mind?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Right. Where we are now. You will know that the plans of Bradford Council are stated specifically to turn this village into a town and to add another 900 houses in addition to the 600 who have been built across the road at High Roads. No plans for any new school places, no new roads, no increase in rail services, no local employment, and no improvement in the sewage or drainage systems. We've said from the outset, you've said to us, and we've passed it on, that a village with 1 through street, 15 shops and 2,000 houses can't possibly cope with another 900 houses built with high occupancy and 2 cars in mind. So that would mean an increase of 40% on the built environment in this village, and we just can't cope with another potentially 4,000 people and 1,800 cars on our narrow streets. Our drains and sewers are already overloaded and have burst frequently. The council just won't listen. This community has done everything it could have done within the law, and everything that was recommended by the previous Housing Minister, Greg Clark, when he visited us. And we've objected to proposals which would gobble up our green fields and bury us in commuter traffic. When there's no employment locally and anyone who comes to live here will have to travel to Leeds or Bradford to find work and commute every day, it seems obvious that the character of this village will be changed beyond recognition. We held the local referendum. There were nearly 2,000 letters from you people of objection. We've presented expert evidence about flooding and traffic congestion, but they won't listen to any of it. So, where we are now, it's 11 months since the planning panel, which concluded that applications on Derry Hill and Bingley Road for the construction of 309 dwellings could proceed, subject to conditions laid down by the chair of that panel. Yes, and if you were there, as many of you were, you will recall, he said that approving construction here was the most difficult decision he'd ever had to make. He said that the residents, the representative bodies and the ward councillors should be fully involved as things progress. Well, we haven't been. In that 11 months, the planning officers have engaged in at least a dozen meetings with the landowners, the developers, their agents and solicitors, and according to the letter I've here from Bradford Council's senior solicitor to the development team, which was dated the 13th of November 2012, I'm going to read you some quotes. The members of the planning panel decided that there should be some form of local consultation. The minutes of the panel do not specify when that local consultation should take place. Next quote, it was made clear to the panel by the planning officers that the heads of terms of those agreements will be largely non-negotiable in the sense that they reflect the council's standard requirements for financial contributions and the provision of affordable housing. The view has been taken that the local consultation should not begin until there are final draft agreements. That is to say, agreements with the developers and the landowners about how much they will contribute financially to the council via Section 106.
Alan, have you got the microphone on? Because
I have.
at the back are finding it difficult to hear.
I've got it on. Does it need more? Okay. All right, Graham? Is that any better? I'll shout if I need to, yeah? Okay. So the final draft agreements that that are discussing with the developers and the landowners, it says in this letter in November, will be agreed within the next week or so, following which the local consultation will take place. Whilst the council has accepted that the residents should be consulted about the draft agreements, the extent to which, if at all, the resident organisations or the individuals who are members of them have extensive local knowledge, and whether any such knowledge has any relevance as far as these developments are concerned, has not and will not be assessed by the council. So, in short, we know what our community is about, but they're not going to listen. In straightforward language then, they will present these final draft agreements to us once the lawyers for the council and the landowners and developers have agreed them, and then consult with us. But they don't have to take any notice of our evidence or our opinions. That stance, if there was any mistake about it, is confirmed in a letter from Bradford Council's Chief Executive to our MP, Philip Davies, dated the 17th of December. And I'll quote from that. Since the planning panel meeting, it has become clear from the letters received from the solicitors for MAG, the MCA and the parish council that their clients, that's us, remain dissatisfied with the way in which various aspects of the applications have been handled by council officers, as well as with the panel's final decision on the application. You bet. The solicitors have given every indication that their clients intend to mount a judicial review challenge on one or both of those areas. The city solicitor with the council's planning, highways and drainage officers is satisfied that the applications, including the Section 106s, have been properly handled throughout this process. The Chief Executive says, I quote, I have no reason to doubt the conclusions that have been reached so far by officers and the panel. It is clear that in any potentially litigious situation, in any meeting, there would be a risk that something was said or conceded by either party which could prejudice that party's position in any future legal proceedings. Something I could not contemplate as far as the council's position is concerned. For those reasons, I do not think it right or appropriate for me to meet with our representatives, that is our representatives, at this time. As regards the local consultation, and this is key, the consultation cannot be open-ended, either in terms of time or the subject matter it will cover. I, the Chief Executive, will not be directly involved with the consultation process, but I am confident that the Council's planning and legal officers will ensure that the consultation is both proper and full, having regard to those ground rules. In short, it is our belief that they will present us with the agreements they've reached, allow us no deviation from what's written in them, and apply a time limit to the period for us to debate them. On this premise, we say that the proposition that localism would empower communities has been found to be somewhat dishonest. Before I close, let me offer you some further quotations. In May 2010, Eric Pickles, the Secretary of State, said, "It will no longer be possible to concrete over large swathes of the country without any regard to what local people want." Sorry, I can stop. Is there a problem?
No, that's fine. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. From now on, communities will be trusted to make the right decisions about what development is suitable for their area, not bossed about by central government and unelected regional quangos. Also from Eric Pickles, the Localism Bill will herald a groundbreaking shift in power to councils and communities, overturning decades of central government control and starting a new era of people power. By getting out of the way and letting councils and communities run their own affairs, we can restore civic pride, democratic accountability and economic growth and build a stronger, fairer Britain. It's the end of the era of big government, laying the foundations for the big society. And from Greg Clark, when he came to visit us here in Menston, Menston can be one of the first in the country to take advantage of the new rules. With those pronouncements being made, the fact remains, across the Bradford district there are 13,720 houses standing empty and 270 derelict sites waiting to be regenerated. The district already has full or outline planning permission granted for over 15,000 houses which are yet to be built. Building on these greenfields with poor access to main roads and where there's no local employment for people is illogical. You may know, because you may have been down to the bottom end of the village as I have today, Menston Old Lane is closed because floodwater has undermined the road. But all the Highways Department is doing is laying a pipe to shift the water from one side of the road to the other, not addressing the cause of the flooding because they can't. The flooding is part of the geology of this village because of how Menston sits on a shelf below the moor and above the river. More houses will result in more flooding. Finally, the surface water and the foul water sewage in this village all runs into the same pipes that have been here for between 50 and 150 years, and they can't cope, as witnessed the recent collapse of the sewers on Westbourne Drive and the sewage coming out of the manhole at Lane Ends and on Fairfax Road. We've got video of all of that, and Yorkshire Water know about it and the council know about it. The floods will come again when this snow starts to melt, as always happens. Our drainage experts report said that if houses are built on Derry Hill or Bingley Road sites, they will flood, and so will the houses downstream of the new building. New residents will not be able to insure their homes, and they won't even be able to sue the council for making a crazy planning decision against good advice. No other community in the UK has done what we've done, but we can't stop now, or our village will be damaged beyond recognition, as will the green fields around it for all future time. We still need your support to prevail on the council or the government to recognise our plight. That's my summary of the situation. There's plenty of time for questions, but I want to pass over to Steve now, who'll take you through some of the issues that we're currently dealing with, bring you right up to date.
Thank you very much, Alan. I hope I can cast my voice to the back of the room.
My wife has an impression lately that I've become Mr. Angry, and I have to say, tonight I really am angry. I'm in receipt of the latest letter from the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, that's Nick Bowles, and this one is actually addressed to me personally, and it looks like it's actually been signed rather than the previous ones that we've received, which are block standard, stamp it, and some Mandarin somewhere signs it off. Now, I've put the two letters together that he sent, and whether you fully appreciate it, the reason for the one show being here is that they are chasing him tomorrow for the issues and that around Guiseley and the Airborough Valley, Rawdon, and it's Stuart Andrew, who's the MP for there, that it's invited Nick Bowles to attend. So I just want to read these paragraphs, and I know it looks like we're reading from a script. Well, again, my wife says that I can speak for England, and I know those of you who know me can probably verify that. But these are the paragraphs that I think are particularly important.
Steve, you are speaking for England. You're speaking for Little England.
Absolutely.
And the rest of us.
Absolutely. The Localism Act, a national planning policy framework, puts councils and communities at the heart of planning. And we have no intention, he's presumably talking about the Conservative or the coalition government at the moment, and we have no intention of changing that. Our reforms to planning policy have three fundamental objectives: to put power in the hands of communities, to shape the places in which they live, to help create the homes and jobs the country needs, and to protect and enhance our natural and historic environment. Now, this is from the latest letter, and there's a lot of usual gobbledygook in there that you get with these letters, but this is the most important. The National Planning Policy Framework does not, and repeat that, does not require councils to provide more houses than are needed. Well, one could argue, do we need any houses except maybe a few for those people that need them in the area, but not to shift large numbers of population here. It simply asks planning authorities to identify and plan to meet the needs of their communities. And there's the important bit: unless adverse impacts of so doing would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Now, I don't think there's a person in this room who could possibly imagine that the 300 houses we're threatened with that way and the 600 we're threatened with that way is not going to make some demonstrable impact on this community. And then this paragraph, which I think really is an absolute corker. We want to see housing development in a properly planned, strategic way, and not just at any cost. Well, one gets an impression that this one we're dealing with is at any cost, but that's my opinion. The cumulative impact of development may also be taken into account by a local council when determining an application. Full stop. Your constituents may therefore wish to raise their concerns directly with Bradford Metropolitan District Council. Well, I mean, it's just staggering that we are going round and round and round, and it's just the case now that we are in a loop. And finally, the framework encourages councils to bring brownfield sites back into use, provided they are not of high environmental value. It also recognises the intrinsic value and beauty of the countryside. Well, I'd have to say this is a pretty beautiful area to live in. Whether or not it is specifically designated, whether ours is or not, I'm not too sure. It was supposed to be a conservation area right up to where these houses are going to be, but that's been tossed aside. It provides strong protection for the green belt, national parks, areas of outstanding natural beauty and sites of special scientific interest, and allows for increased protection of valuable local green spaces. Well, of all of the people sat here who had to have the worst indignity, or whatever the expression I could come up with, to sit through 5 days of a village green inquiry to be told that the area is flat, that the farm at the top of the hill isn't on a hill, that nobody can toboggan down the slopes because it hasn't snowed for 20 years. I have a photograph with me, which anybody can have a look at, dated the day before yesterday, of the farmer who has no vested interest in this greenfield application, slurrying the slopes to stop the children sledging on it. Exactly what he did last year. We were completely ridiculed and told you're lying, in effect. So, what I thought I'd just do to prove to everybody that we're not alone in some of these comments and thoughts, I'm just going to show you one or two of the headlines that we've had, and this one in particular, which is from the Yorkshire Evening Post, and from the comment, there is an undeniable need to build new housing, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but not where local infrastructure is incapable of supporting it. In such a context, efforts to prevent 300 new homes being built in Menston are not yet another example of NIMBYism, but a sensible attempt to oppose inappropriate development. It is inappropriate to put houses on fields that are just not for development. The village and its existing services cannot support the influx of new residents these proposals would trigger. That's from them. Now, I have Menston Homes protesters to seek judicial review from the Telegraph and Argos. Village Green applications, inquiry blow for campaigners fighting Derry Hill. Home plans does not hold water. We go back for 3 years. You can now understand how I've become a very angry man. I lived here happily for 22 years, enjoying the area, the environment, minding my own business, and suddenly I'm thrown, whether I like it or not, I'm that sort of character, into a situation where I'm damned if these houses are going to get built, because I'm going to be in the floodplain when they do. Now, whether that's called NIMBYism or self-protection, I don't know what, but what we've discovered over the past 3 or 4 weeks, really, is it seems to be the case that the council are untouchable in just about every area. It's as if they are Teflon proof. Now, I would challenge this, and yet I'm convinced now that all over the nation we've got similar situations cropping up where, in effect, councils are not really accountable. Only the officers that are elected every so many years seem to be. But when you read some of those letters that we've given you as handouts, you'll realise that we are getting absolutely nowhere with them. Now, it forces us almost into a situation where they're saying, take us to court then, do your best. They know what the risks are. And that's the point I'd like to bring up now, is the fact that we have gone over £60,000, which I think for a community of no more than 5,500 people is absolutely extraordinary. And if we can keep that going, all well and good, we're still hoping that we may not have to go for a judicial review. But it's almost now that the council are just saying, do your best, because we're not going to listen. And they're not even going to look at the, 25,000 quid's worth of flooding and drainage report that we've got now. They're not even going to read it. They don't want to know. Now, I don't know what blackballing really means in terms of an expression, but that's what I would say that's happened to this community. For some reason or other, Bradford Council have blackballed us to the point where we are just not getting anywhere with them. They're not listening, they're not looking. And it goes back, and this is where I get really angry now, and you don't want to know me when I get really angry. It goes back to the time when Alan and I decided, really over a beer probably, let's have a look at the objection letters. And when we went to Bradford Council and we found the letters all just in a couple of cardboard boxes, some hadn't been opened, no collating, no representation, nothing. We said, right, that's it. We need to now audit the entire group. And I thank you, the people in the audience who did some of that audit work, which I haven't had an opportunity to thank until this particular occasion. And when we started to see the figures that were coming out of there, we couldn't believe how many people said flooding and drainage is a major issue in this village. And yet, Is it Pond or Mr. Poole or Mr. Weather or whatever?
Yeah,
Mr. Poole. Mr. Poole, the expert from Bradford Flooding and Drainage, says there is not an issue with flooding and drainage in Menstone. Well, why doesn't he come here and walk about a while and see it for himself?
Steve, do you mean Walk or Wade?
Wade would be a better bet. Yes, probably Wade. Now, we did have a meeting, as you know, a few months ago to demonstrate some of that flooding and drainage. You might remember we showed some PowerPoints and we showed some of the examples. That's escalated way beyond that since then. It's as if he up there is looking down on us and saying, look, I'll give you the evidence, but they're not looking at it. And we don't know now what else we can do. And if anybody's got any more examples or ways that other communities have done this, I'll be only too pleased to hear it. But going back to what Alan said, I personally don't think there is another community in the UK who's put up such a vigorous fight as we have, and you suddenly get the feeling you're fighting against ghosts because they're just not there. And you begin to get so exasperated with this, and I can feel my blood pressure just going up and up and up and up. And my wife will step in a minute and say, here, have another chill pill, because you need one. And unfortunately, this is what happens with this stuff. You do get exasperated. Tomorrow, I'm more exasperated because I would have liked to have gone to the meal with the minister tomorrow to actually throw some of this at him. But I'm not going to get that opportunity. But Alan and I do have a little bit of information, which I'm going to leave him to tell you about the email we got yesterday.
Yes, fortunately, Philip Davies has intervened on our behalf with the Minister's office, and I've opened the email only this morning to find out that he can't give us a date yet, but he will ensure that we get an opportunity to interact with the Minister, Nick Bowles, because we will probably miss that opportunity tomorrow. Well, we will miss it. But the Minister is in Stuart Andrews' constituency, and therefore it's only fair that Stuart Andrew and his constituents get the shout. But Philip Davies has promised that Nick Bowles' office will facilitate a meeting with us. Now, who the us is, I don't know, but you can bet your boots we'll be in there kicking and thrusting. We don't know a date yet, but we'll work on that.
So it's as if we've got our own private little audience now, with a bit of luck.
I'm going to hand you over now to Chris Schofield, who can possibly put some more information together on where we are in terms of the legal issues.
Thank you, Alan. I think most of you will have heard me speak before. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a planner at Schofield Sweeney, and I've been helping MAG and MCA and MPC for 3 years now. I'm working pro bono, that is to say, unpaid. This is my sort of bid for the community. The legal position at the moment is that we are in something of a hiatus. There is no final planning determination. Albeit we had the planning meeting in February last year, the final planning decision has not yet been made. Until that is made, we have little or no opportunity to bring any formal legal proceedings if that's what we wish to do. I've been working very, very closely with Professor Rose, and we've been focusing principally on the drainage issues. We have taken specialist counsel's advice and leading counsel's advice on the issues, and I have to say, with a view to being able to bring judicial proceedings if things come to that. We have got ourselves to a situation working with very, very distinguished drainage engineers where we can prove mathematically that the drainage scheme proposed by the developer is, I think the phrase we've used is absurdly inadequate to deal with the water flowing over both the Derry Hill and the Bingley Road site. We are trying to engage with the local authority, and we have persisted with that. We have, through Philip Davies, attempted to broker a meeting with Tony Reeves, Bradford Council's Chief Executive, he has, as you've heard, has declined to act. I have to say that's a distinct lack of leadership on his part. I do believe that as Steve said, the council's strategy is to exhaust us financially and effectively to call our bluff and to force us to take legal proceedings. I think that's most unfortunate. I think a proper dialogue with the community would help to resolve a lot of these issues. Our strategy is to continue to persist and to put the information we have about the drainage and about the sewerage issues before the council, and QC's advice is that if the council fails to take account of that evidence, then we have the basis of a judicial review, and that's currently where we are. I don't intend this evening to give any sort of commentary on prospects. I'll happily take questions. I don't think my view of our prospects is for an open meeting. And the one thing I would say, and a point I would pick up with Alan, and making reference to Tony Reeves' letter, he places great stock on the opinion of his officials. And we know and we can demonstrate that there were serious mistakes made by the officers involved, and I'm afraid to say it's also the case that there was dishonesty. And I think in those circumstances, it's very, very hard for me and those involved, and I think the wider community, to give a great deal of credibility to the opinions of those officials involved. And again, we have attempted to make that point, to a number of people. We are scheduled to have a meeting with Yorkshire Water to discuss particularly the issues relating to the surcharge of sewage into Main Street in Menston. I can't really anticipate the meeting, but the fact that Yorkshire Water have finally been persuaded to meet is indicative that they recognise that there is a problem. They've seen the videos of the flooding and the sewage in Main Street that we put up on YouTube. I think it's fair to say that they recognise a problem. I think we can anticipate when we do meet them that they will say that the reason why sewage surcharge is because of the land drainage issues. I think also indicative of the position with Bradford Council, Yorkshire Water, when they asked us to have this meeting, suggested that it would be most helpful if Bradford Council came to that meeting. And we have invited the local authorities' drainage officers to the meeting. They have declined. And the reason cited for declining is that we are considering legal proceedings. And again, we find ourselves in this very, very difficult situation of, to make something happen, we are effectively put in a position where our only remedy is to pursue formal legal proceedings, and I think that's most unfortunate. I think that's a fair summary. David, I think, does that cover the ground?
Could I add a couple of things?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Do you hear me? Okay. Right, a couple of things I'd like to add to what Chris was saying, because we have been deep in, we've been doing a lot over Christmas, New Year and everything on this. But just to say that, and I've said this before, Bingley Road site, the Sirius did this geo-environmental assessment before any drainage report, and they stated in their formal report that there was significant issues with groundwater flooding. They said there are springs and seasonal springs on the site and above the site, discharging across the site. That's what's called groundwater flooding from dormant springs. It's equivalent to a developer applying for planning permission on a plot of land next to the Wharfe River between Burley and Otley, right, where we know there's what's called fluvial flooding from under the river, Wharfe floods there, And the council's saying, no, just consider rain falling on that side and we'll give you planning permission. Forget about the flooding. And that's exactly what they're saying on the Bingley Road side. I mean, that was even before any application or any flood risk exercise being done. With regard to the Derry Hill side, it's slightly different because the springs that we're talking about, dormant springs, are above the site. And they actually cause the water to flow down in quantities which, well, from 2008 we worked out the quantities, but from that information on the 24th, 25th of September last year, we got pretty exact results. And just to give you an example, the amount of water then flowing across the Derry Hill side was more than 100,000 cubic metres, and they're saying if they store 1,000, 1% of it, that's only going to occur once in 100 years. That's what the council are saying, right? Now, they don't understand what it's all about. So this is ignorance. And in fact, as you well know, in 2010, there was the Flood and Water Management Act, which transferred all the power and authority on flooding and water management from the Environment Agency, the Water Authority, to the local authority. So the local authority now has control of everything, including everything to do with flooding, so they can make any decision they like. Okay? And what they've done, they had to submit a report to Europe, because it's part of the European law, in June 2011, and they did it, Bradford Council, and there's considered different types of flooding, and the British Geological Society, through the Environment Agency, have published maps for all parts of the UK to assist local councils. The one for Bradford, and I've actually got a copy here, people look, has got a lot of what's called brown on it, and it means it's probably one of the worst areas in the whole of the UK for groundwater emergence. There are reasons for this, but it's there in black and white. The council reproduced that in this report and then made a statement saying there is no evidence of any groundwater flooding in the Bradford area apart from some flooding in cellars in Keighley. So that showed total ignorance and incompetence of the council's drainage group. Now, their legal position, as Chris has said, is quite clear here. They're spending our council tax money getting outside legal advice, outside advice from Queen's Counsel to fight us on the basis they're trying to defend their own ignorance and incompetence. And that's really what we got. And their real objective here is to try and do it such that we run out of time and money to attack them. And that's their strategy. You've got to understand that.
David, does that mean they're using our rate money to attack us?
Just yours, not mine.
Thanks. If I can just remind everybody what David just said. He said the British Geological Survey map showed a lot of brown in Menston, and that's quite good because we all know where the brown is in Menston. We walk through it in Main Street every time the sewers flood, but I don't think that's what they meant. There are not many villages that would wade through poo the way we wade through poo, and it wouldn't make national headlines. Let's remember that this building that they propose for our village here is likely to be matched by other buildings they propose further up and down the Wharfe Valley. We've got our colleagues here from Guiseley, and remember, if they put 900 homes in Menston, it's going to be, what the multipliers, what are 9/8, Steve? Somebody help me. What are 9/8?
72.
Right, 7,200 vehicle movements are going to be leaving Menston and driving through his backyard, and that's why we're working closely with our colleagues on the lead side of the boundary in Guiseley and Hawksworth. So really what we're in here is we're in the shallow end of the cesspool, and it's going to get deeper if this continues. And I'm not sure what the answer is, because from what David said is that Bradford now doesn't have to take advice from anybody. The technical advice certainly on the Bingley Road site is that the site is not sustainable and should never be developed, but that doesn't matter because the council's officers directed the elected members to ignore that because they're the experts. We had Mr. Poole from Bradford stand up at our planning meeting and say that Professor Rhodes' calculations were wrong. Within 6 months, we actually had the video footage with markers and the rainfall, which demonstrated Professor Rhodes was in fact correct. What do we do next? Questions? Yeah. Questions?
What are they doing about the infrastructure of schools and school places? I'd just like to ask what they're going to do about school places if there's 900 new houses in Maidstone. Already in Guiseley, I believe next year 60 kids won't have a place at school, so what are they going to do about that?
Anybody want to field that?
I can tell you what Bradford have said, and that is we'll bus your kids to schools. And what they've suggested is that those schools, secondary schools we're talking in particular, maybe at Keighley or Silsden or Bingley. Now, I don't know how acceptable any other parent would feel it for their secondary school children to be on a bus morning and evening trundling through the same traffic that everybody else has got to get through to go to school, because it'll extend the kids' working day by at least an hour morning and evening. But there you go, that is Bradford's solution, and the law says they do not have to provide local secondary school or even primary school places. As long as there are places in the district, that's adequate.
It seems to me it's plain that they're not listening to us. From my meagre experience with councils, the only thing they're interested in is money. So how about Maidstone as a whole? Hold back the rates. Don't need to not pay them. Put them to one side so we can say the money's there when you start listening to us.
I'd love to be able to do it, but I couldn't recommend it to you. I've investigated that situation because I personally was prepared to do that. But the legal remedies available to the council are so draconian that even I wouldn't contemplate it, because at the very least they can take you through court proceedings. The debt is an immediate debt that's payable. You are charged an interest charge for going a day overdue. They'll charge you a surcharge for not paying when you're due, and they will then force you to pay the whole of your council tax for future years up front. So it and there are court proceedings that can sling you and clink if you don't pay. And to be honest, I would be entirely happy to see the entire population of Maidstone marched into Armley Prison if that was the case. It won't ever happen, but how you cause that sort of issue to come about, I honestly don't know. I wonder whether you think it's an advisable course of action, Chris.
But bear in mind, Chris is in fact a solicitor, so he's...
Well, for all the reasons that Alan said, I wouldn't recommend that. It clearly registers a vote of protest, but the only way forward is we are a pressure group, and the only way forward is to continue to lobby and come what may to make ourselves heard. And I don't think anybody should be putting themselves in a situation where they're personally financially at risk. That's not something I would recommend.
Excuse me, I'm finding it extremely hard at the moment to understand how the politicians will say, it's up to you now. You can design your own village and do as you please. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not used to sit with them now. Is we're working? Yeah. And it seems ludicrous that one politician should say, yes, you can do what you like, not more or less do what you like, but your plans are your plans. And then the local council are turning around and saying, well, you can go sling hook, because we'll do what we want. And I still find that really hard to understand. We shouldn't have to be doing all this arguing and fighting and saying we want this, we want, we'd like to do that. it's not as though you're saying we want to bomb the place and start afresh with, you know, do like the hospital or anything like that. You're just planning on making the place pleasant as it was. I mean, and then I'm not against anybody having a home to live in, but there's, you know, I'm sure there's more ways and means. I mean, you just said how many houses are empty and not being used, and seems very strange. I just have a hardship in understanding that. You're talking to the politician and he's not, you know, saying you can do this, you can do that. I mean, if I work for a company and the boss says to me, you got to do that, I can't say, well, you can bugger off, I'm going to do what I like.
You're quite right. There are contradictions in what's being said and what's being practiced as policy. How we get the politicians who have the authority to implement the policy that they're talking about, I don't know. But they're not all the same. I have to say, not all politicians are like. I mean, this migrants' fuel need for green belt homes. I know it came out of the Daily Mail, but this was a pronouncement by Nick Bowles, the planning minister, and then. Almost in the next issue of the newspaper was a story from another politician, Nick Lambert, who seems to be expounding entirely reasonable and sensible theories and practices, saying we need houses, but don't forget the sewers. He goes on to say, in the 60s, nearly 3/4 of England was undisturbed by development. Today, urban sprawl and the roads it brings intrudes into more than half of the country. It's the casual loss of this England, the quiet countryside around our towns and villages, that people worry about. And he goes on to say the government's definition of sustainable development is ensuring that better lives for ourselves don't mean worse lives for future generations. I'll go with that. This means we should not deny young people the chance we've had to own our own properties, but it also means taking care not to damage the countryside. And at the very least, it means ensuring that where such housing is needed, there is adequate infrastructure to support it. Nick Herbert is the Conservative MP for Arundel and South Downs. The two contradictions in statements, you know, in the course of a couple of days.
Can I ask, are there any proposals for new local long-term job opportunities for the proposed new residents in this new housing, so that they don't have to use the already overcrowded public transport systems which exist into Leeds and Bradford?
It's a one-word answer, and the answer is no. There is absolutely nothing proposed in terms of new local employment.
In fact, Comet's just shut it down, haven't it?
It will have done, yes. Yeah.
Jessup's has gone down. Right, am I using this all right, am I? Yeah. I know I've said this before, and I've said it time and time again, but I think that I agree that we have got to win this fight. God in heaven, we've got to do it. Somehow or somewhere, we've got to make these politicians listen. We owe it to future generations. As I've said before, that when you go to the top of, well, Park, if you go to the top of Park Road or Green Lane, as I used to know it from my youth, because it was a green lane in those days, before all the housing down at the bottom and everything like that. You look across, and you're looking across at towards two of this county's premier landscapes. We've got the Nidderdale area of outstanding natural beauty just across the river, which stretches from there over the Washburn Valley towards Nidderdale, and then going up towards Fountains Abbey, Brimham Rocks, and beyond up to Massam. A beautiful area. And then it butts on straight onto another supreme landscape, the Yorkshire Dales National Park landscape, the Dales. Now, I've said this time and time again, but we owe it to our future generations, because you go and stand on the top of Asquith Moor and look across on this side. At the moment, it's pretty pleasant. You see Ilkley Moor, you will look across, and you're going to, you see Menston. I know you see a little bit of build-up, but it's not as much. But if this development goes ahead, you're going to see a mini city, and nobody is going to want to stand on the top of those moors and see a mini city on the other side of the. This is why we have got to get this through to somehow. How, I don't know. I'm not Machiavellian enough to know really, but we have to win this fight somehow. So we've got to get out there, get stuck in, and continue this fight. And get this building stuck, because I think Menston's overcrowded already. I mean, that's a personal view, but I do think that I do believe sincerely that we have to stop this development for future generations and to provide a nice buffer zone between the urban background of the Leeds Bradford and these two landscapes on the other side of the valley. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. I've got one there. I'll be back in a second. So Chris, got one then over. So Chris has mooted that Menston might become a mini city. Actually, we don't need a mini city here. There's a large city just over there that's got 13,500 empty houses. Planning permission for how many, Alan?
Another 17,000, something of that sort.
And a hole in the middle that was promised a shopping centre.
Yeah.
So they can't sort out their problems. So the solution is to give us a bigger problem. Interesting. Coming over to this lady over here.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to debate really that councils actually look beyond their boundaries as councils to the next council around them. So for instance, several people have mentioned infrastructure problems, and of course Leeds has housing developments perhaps not fully developed just on our borders, which affect our local infrastructure as well. That's my point. Thank you.
I think I've got something that might want to answer that. Yeah, I've got one down there as well. Do you want to go for an answer? Have you got an answer? Yeah. Scoop, we've got an answer.
I mean, we've approached that. They don't want to know. They won't talk to each other. They don't need it. They've basically got the power to do anything they want themselves.
Yeah, I'm going to come to David as well for an answer on this, and then I've got two more questions. I've got one there, and we've got 5 people.
Yes, David Ingham, Chairman of Ward. We're a network community organisation who are currently speaking for 31 communities like yours, Mag, across Wharfdale and Airedale. We're also liaising with Kirklees Network Association, who speak with 17 communities there. We're currently convening a Pan-Yorkshire conference, which will occur on the, what's the date we changed it to? The 9th of March. That'll be held, one-day conference at Wheatfield Hall, University of Leeds Conference Centre, in order to coordinate action like this via MPs and other constituencies across Yorkshire. We're also cooperating with the CPRE. We're affiliated members and we have their support in this, and we're going to extend the campaign nationwide. Our intention is to try and get reform of planning legislation, which at the moment is heavily weighted in favour of developers and against local communities like you. There is no third-party right of appeal. To answer the question about local authorities cooperating, in law the legislation says that is what they must do. In practice, Leeds and Bradford are doing nothing of the kind. And that's one of the major problems.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. Yeah.
Chris, this is a question for you, if I may. Can I first of all clarify something? Did you suggest that officers had acted dishonestly, or did I mishear you?
No, you didn't mishear me. No.
Well, in those circumstances, before we start going to the expense of a judicial review, surely there must be some right of redress against officers of a local authority who have acted dishonestly. What is the mechanism for such action?
Well, there are a number of mechanisms. I wrote a very detailed letter to the leader of the council in October 2011, specifically bringing those issues to the attention of the leader and copied the chief executive. The city solicitor wrote to me, and I have to say the answers were unsatisfactory. There is, in fact, the only person who can actually sanction the officers concerned is the local authority itself. The local authority is the employer. There is an ombudsman process which a number of my colleagues here have tried to pursue, but that's proved to be unsatisfactory. I think one of my impression is that if the council had in fact taken action against its officers, it would have posed itself an embarrassment. And I think in effect the local authority have no option other than to back their officers. And I think that is the principal concern here. It's practically impossible now to have a constructive dialogue with the local authority because of a simple lack of trust. And it's most unfortunate.
This should be recognised by our elected representatives and should be looked at on a national basis. This is dishonest. This should not be happening.
I agree. It really is not good enough. I mean, this is not a local authority that's endowed with a pedigree of good planning decisions. And the office. My own opinion is that the officers concerned shouldn't be in office.
I can advise you that I took a challenge up with the local government ombudsman. It was referred back to Bradford Council, as it would be. Bradford Council then told the local government ombudsman that the issue had been settled. It wasn't. When I took it back up with the local government ombudsman, they told me it had been settled. That was news to me. I have a letter here from the Assistant Director of Planning, Transportation, Highways and Running Around in Circles, and he said that I've received a very poor service from his department and he's expressed his dissatisfaction to the officers concerned. He's also confirmed that an email was sent by one of the officers to the local government ombudsman, which said that there were aspects of the complaint made in my letter which had not been fully dealt with under stage 1 of the complaints procedure, and therefore it couldn't progress to stage 2 of the procedure. Now that's the third time I've been round that loop, so every time a complaint is lodged, it is indicated to have been settled, and then you've got to start again at stage 1.
Did you collect £200, Alan?
No, I didn't pass go yet, so I'm still waiting for that. I have, however, lodged a letter with a number of freedom of information requests, which the aforesaid Assistant Director has promised, somewhat belatedly, they're supposed to answer it within 20 days. I actually had a meeting with him a couple of weeks ago, and he's asked me to give him until the 4th of February when he will respond fully. I am quite sure he will not write that letter himself, as he didn't write this other letter himself, and that it will be drafted by the city solicitor, and that it will be another 6 pages of waffle. But that's life, I'm afraid. Yes, Graham?
I've got another question from you.
This is a question about flooding. I've come across Bradford Council with flooding and them not being willing to deal with anything when my house has flooded twice. But as soon as I've had the environmental health involved, everybody seems to jump. They seem to have masses of power. Is this still the case? Can environmental health actually make Bradford Council accountable?
To an extent, but Bradford Council ultimately have the say under the Flooding and Water Management Act 2010. What they can't cope with is the other element of it, and that is the Health Protection Agency. So I got them involved when we had flooding down on Westbourne Drive, which was covering a resident's garden with sewage. The Health Protection Agency told me that they only get actively involved when there is an epidemic. So I suggested to them it was time they got involved before the epidemic occurred. But they have been in touch with the Yorkshire Water, and I think we have a degree of expectation that Yorkshire Water will at least show some understanding, which Bradford Council aren't. Ladies and gentlemen, we have massively overrun the time I expected. You know, I'm happy to stay on. I'm sure others are as well. But we've got to get these lads that have come across from Manchester for us, and they're, you know, I'd like to make sure that Tom and Simon get back to their hotel before they close the doors.
Are you staying anywhere nice, lads?
So we're happy to stay on, and we're happy to answer further questions. But I don't want to keep you here if you don't want to be here.
Yeah, so it's up to you, but before you do go, I've just been reminded, and this is a little inside information from a little bird in the know, is those of you with internet access, look at the Ward website tomorrow night. If you don't know how to find it, if you just put in Ward Yorkshire, it's the first return on a Google search, and there should be something interesting on there tomorrow night, and hopefully we might be able to echo it on our own village websites.
It's wardyorkshire.org.
It's wardyorkshire.org tomorrow night. Alan, so what we're going to do, are we going to wrap up now?
Yes, I think so. There's only one other thing to say, and that is, it's been amazing that we've managed, for such a small community, to rattle together £62,000. The sad thing is, it's not enough. It's gone. It's evaporated. We've spent it, and therefore, you know,
it's not gone down the sewer, has it, Alan?
No, well, yeah, it's maybe got flushed. I don't know.
Has it been flushed away?
Yes.
Okay.
But we need more. But I would take a bet on the fact that most people in this room have already contributed. And I would take a good bet on the fact that most of you have already submitted letters of objection about either Derry Hill and Bingley Road or both. But there are people out there who haven't. And maybe they don't understand in the way that you do what the issues are. Now all we can do is lob out bits of paper. We can put out, the Maidstone News will be going out next week. I've got it in my garage ready for distribution. And that will be going out. And we can print handbills and leaflets and wadges of information about it. But there are people out there who ain't reading it. And there are people out there who it's got no impact on because they don't understand or they don't want to put their hands in the pocket. So it would really be helpful if you would do what you can to crank up your neighbours. And anybody who hasn't donated yet, see if we can get them to donate before you dip in your pockets again. I would like to thank you for all your efforts on our behalf.
And thank you for coming tonight. And please, as you make your way back down there across the ice, if you want some help, I'll be out there. What I'm intending to do is to throw myself on the ice so that you've all got a softer journey on your way down. So please do be very, very careful. And thank you for coming tonight, ladies and gents. Thank you.